I'm coming at you live on tape from Sydney, Ohio. And this week we're talking about the history of cage matches. It's a special request. Now, the first cage match happened on June 25th, 1937 in Atlanta, Georgia. Because where else is a cage match going to happen but Atlanta, Georgia? And it was between Jack Blumenfeld and Count Pietro Rossi. I hope I pronounced that right. I probably didn't. And the original cage was chicken wire that they strung up between the ropes. They strung up inside the ring. And you've got to understand, this was a big feud ender because in the 30s, wrestling was still treated like it was real. You know, it hadn't come out yet that it was fake. Unlike now where everybody knows it's fake, in the 30s it was still treated like it was an actual sport. So to have a cage match that even though it's only chicken wire and it's not even 6 foot tall yet, is a big match. And so it was very much treated like it was real. Now, as we know from my history of blood and blading in wrestling video, bleeding wasn't big yet in the 30s. That didn't become big till the 50s. And blading didn't really become big till the 70s. So there probably was blood in this match, but it was probably legitimate blood from the chicken wire. Cage matches would go on. They'd be used a little bit in the 50s, but they really wouldn't pick up steam till the mid-70s. And then they changed to be less chicken wiry and more of what we know modern cages to be. Now, some cages, everybody did cages different in the 70s and 80s. In Memphis, their cage didn't just go tightly around the ring. It had a space in between where they could fight outside the ring. In WWE in the 80s, they introduced the steel bar cage, which the wrestlers hated because it was made up of steel bars. I've got a kitten staring at me while I'm talking, which is really weird because the kitten normally wants nothing to do with me. She's normally playing with the lights or something. But it's made up of steel bars, and it was introduced at WrestleMania 2 and last used at St. Valentine's Day Massacre between Steve Austin and Vince McMahon, and actually hurt the wrestlers when wrestling. And the common belief is when Vince McMahon wrestled in it, he realized how much it hurt, and so he retired that cage. Now cages are made up of chain link fence because it is cheap, it is affordable, and it's easy to move. It's easy to sit up. But for a long time, cages were chicken wire. And they either sit them up around the turnbuckles or are inside the ring. Some notable cage matches were in early WWF in the 70s were Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko. You had Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy, the first steel bar cage match in WWF in WrestleMania 2. There's some variations on the cage match. Of course, we talked about triple-tiered cage matches in another video, so I'm not going to go into that. There's the Hell in a Cell match, which, while not the first cage match with a roof, It is pretty much just a cage match with a roof, which goes slightly outside around the ring, so they can fight kind of on the outside. It was first introduced in '97. There's the Elimination Chamber, which was introduced because Triple H wanted a War Games match, but Vince McMahon said no. So Triple H created the Elimination Chamber, which is a cage made up of, I don't remember how many tons of steel, but it has glass pods in it where people are held until it's their time to come out. There are dome cage matches. There's this famous 6 sides of steel in TNA, back when they had the 6-sided ring. I wish they'd bring that back. 6-sided ring was always interesting to watch. There's so many variations of cage matches. There's the barbed wire cage match, where they wrap barbed wire around the top. WWF did that between Big Show and JBL. WCW did it between Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. That was the closest Hulk Hogan's ever come to barbed wire in his life. Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair barbed wire cage match is a clusterfuck. You need to watch that. The JBL Big Show barbed wire cage match is brutal. I mean, blood is everywhere. It is just a brutal match. I think that pay-per-view is rated MA. I think it's a No Mercy pay-per-view with JBL defending his title. And I think it's rated mature just because of that match. So there's so many variations on the cage. I'm not going to get into them all, mainly because I can't remember them all. But yes, it all started back when wrestling was thought to be real in 1937 with a chicken wire cage between two people ending a feud, and it was a big feud ender. Now, during the 80s, it was still a big feud ender. Now, in our day and age, you can see it on Raw or Dynamite or Collision or TNA, whatever TNA's show is called nowadays, TNA Wrestling or whatever they're called, where just two people jump into a cage. But it was a big feud ender for many years. Nowadays, we've got the variations of the cage matches that are the big feud enders, like Hell in a Cell or stuff like that. But it was, for many years, the big feud ender match. It was meant to keep interference out and let the wrestlers go at it inside the ring, so that the two wrestlers, it was one-on-one, there was no interference, and we had a victor finally. That was the original premise of the steel cage. And originally, and Jim Ross has said that he doesn't like steel cage matches, one where people can climb out over the top. He prefers to be pinfall submission. Samoa Joe had a steel cage match where it was submission or KO in TNA. I wish they'd bring that back. That was a good match. I think Samoa Joe KO'd the guy too. But yeah, I actually prefer the ones where they're trying to escape. I think it adds an element to the match. So that is basically the history of the steel cage match. It all started when wrestling was still real. Join me next week where we'll talk about something else.